The Florida Gators added to their 2026 recruiting class this weekend, and I'd be willing to bet it won't be the last time from this list.
You are Locked On Gators, your daily podcast on the Florida Gators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Locked On Gators, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free wherever you listen to podcasts and on YouTube. Happy Monday. I am Brandon Olsen. Find me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Find all my written work with New York Giants on SI. Today's episode of Locked On Gators is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Just a reminder, you can like, subscribe, comment, review. We are available again on YouTube every morning, 8 a.m. Eastern time, and audio goes up at 3 a.m. Eastern time. But we're going to talk about this Florida Gators official visit weekend, and we're going to go in the same order we talked about these players on Thursday. So we will get to G'Nivrre Carr, who committed to Florida yesterday evening, and we'll start with Javion Cooper, but we are going to talk about every player. And offensive tackle Javion Cooper, Syracuse commit, 4-star everywhere, except he's a 3-star and 24/7. And when we spoke about Cooper on Thursday, we spoke about how he has visits set with Florida State, UCF, and Syracuse. So clearly his recruitment is not shut down at this point. Florida looked like the most likely spot to flip if he flips. And I will say, I still believe that if Javion Cooper flips from Syracuse, Florida is still the most likely spot for that. However, on Friday afternoon, evening, it got announced that Javion Cooper would not be visiting this past weekend and that he would need to push it back. And I think that the verbiage there is important to acknowledge that it's not we're canceling it. It's we need to push it back, which again, that happens a lot. Things just happen. Things pop up and players need to push back visits. Happens all the time. Usually a good indicator of their interest still is if it gets pushed back and not straight up canceled. Offensive lineman G'Nivrre Carr committed to Florida yesterday. We'll talk more about that this week. Big fan of his film. We talked about him, I mean, months ago at this point as someone that, hey, he's a good player. I don't care about his ranking. 3-star and On3 and 24/7, 4-star on ESPN and Rivals. And this is again on Thursday. We spoke about G'Nivrre Carr. We said, hey, Florida's in the lead for him and still feels like Florida's in the lead for him. Has visits scheduled with Alabama, Georgia, and Tennessee with a commitment date set for June 25th. And then, of course, no longer has a commitment date set for June 25th, is now a Florida Gator. And we haven't, at the time of recording this, haven't gotten confirmation about if those other 3 visits are still going to happen or not with Alabama, Georgia, and Tennessee. And we went live when G'Nivrre Carr committed yesterday, which, by the way, I think that June's going to be a big month for Florida recruiting-wise. We are going to try to go live for every single one of them. We went live yesterday when Carr committed. And we had this conversation about, visits after committing or visits elsewhere after committing. And I understand people that hate it. I understand, but I don't necessarily agree with the notion that if you go on visits elsewhere while you're committed, then you're not really committed. Because at the same time, I would also kind of prefer that the recruit goes on their visits and gets that confirmation. Because if you go on those visits and you still want to be a Gator, then I think you have your answer of, oh yeah, I'm a Gator. I'm meant to be a Gator. Whereas if you cancel those visits and then you end up not liking Florida as much, it's like, oh, did I rush this process? And it becomes a whole thing. Again, obviously the ideal way to go about a recruitment process as a player is to go through your visits and then make your decision. And that's probably your best decision. Here, that's not the case, but hey, keep him locked in. I think he's a damn good player. Offensive lineman Blaze Thomasy, offensive tackle that Florida is looking at him as a center. Again, on 3 said center. I've asked interior offensive lineman, and that's it. I'm not disputing what they said. That's just they got a more specific position than interior offensive line. He's a 3-star everywhere except he's unranked on ESPN. Top 5 of Florida, Duke, Stanford, TCU, and Tulane. But a couple things there. One, he is a low priority target right now, unsurprisingly, right? I mean, you look at the offer list, and that's not usually a kid that Florida's really putting the temperature up on in this recruitment process. He's also said that Florida's at the top of his list right now. So I do think that it's as simple as if Florida wants him, they'll have him. Offensive tackle Javari Lucas is a 3-star on 3 and 24/7. He is unranked by ESPN and Rivals. And this has not been quiet. It's not been a secret that Florida's at the top of this list. Comes from a family of Florida Gators fans, and his cousin is running back Kelvin Taylor, who was also on campus for this visit as well, and was still tweeting very, very pro-Florida. So makes you think that for any of this conversation that's going to be had, if it's Javari Lucas and Kelvin Taylor, makes you think that Kelvin Taylor is going to say Florida. Javari Lucas has his visit set for West Virginia and South Florida. He has a commitment date set that he set this weekend. He set the commitment date for July 1st, and I'm still heavily leaning with Florida. I'm heavily leaning Florida. I think July 1st through July 5th. I'll say this. From June 1st to July 5th, Florida should fill out a good chunk of their recruiting class. 4-star defensive lineman Vodney Cleveland is a 4-star everywhere. Florida is in the lead, right? Here's the thing. He's still got visits with Texas and Georgia coming up and is then supposed to make his decision. He previously took a visit to Auburn, an official visit to Auburn. But at this point, it just, honestly, it just feels like they're way behind. And so I'm not really looking at Auburn right now for that. Jarayla McCoy, 4-star on 3 and Rivals, 3-star on 24/7, 5-star on ESPN, if you remember from Thursday, if you listen to Thursday. He is the only guy who is a 3-4-5. Like, he was the only player that had that much range in his recruitment rankings. I also noted on Thursday that Florida's been picking up a lot of momentum in his recruitment so far in recent weeks and in months. And I don't think I said this Thursday, but I did say it a few weeks ago, if I'm not mistaken, that Florida feels good about how they've handled this recruitment and where they stand. He's still got Texas up next. He has visits scheduled with Ole Miss and LSU. We'll see if those happen. But this does feel like it's likely Florida or Texas there. 3-star defensive lineman Tyson Bacon, formerly committed to Tennessee, has since decommitted. A 3-star everywhere except Rivals, where he's a 4-star. And again, I think that this is still going to be one that comes down to the wire. That's always been a thing I said, and I'm going to keep saying it until it's wrong. 4-star edge rusher Ashari Charles. He's a 4-star everywhere. And like I mentioned on Thursday, like, this was a recruitment that I kind of just went, I feel like he's Miami bound. And Penn State got involved, and then Florida got the official visit. And he was very active posting about the visit on social media, engaging with other media that was posting about his official visit. Looked to enjoy it, as in he looked to enjoy the visit. And I feel like we've reached a point where we can say, all right, like, this is probably going to be a pretty long recruitment process at this point, which is good for Florida because Florida was way behind. And so it's good if this recruitment process drags out for Florida. Okay, that works in Florida's favor. The last front player that we'll talk about is unranked edge Corey Howard. He's unranked, has visits from Florida and Georgia recently. And I don't think he's a take right now, especially when you look at what else they're working with on the defensive front. It's easy to see, like, oh, we're going to prioritize these guys at these positions, whatever that may be. But by the time the season comes around, especially with some of these players, and I'm not saying for this past visit specifically, but just some of the players that Florida's recruiting, they have their recruitments or commitments set for, a lot of players are committing that July 1st to July 5th weekend or week. If Florida misses out on those guys, I could see them easily going, all right, now we're going to spin the block on Corey Howard and see what we can make happen there. We are going to talk about the secondary for this visit when we get back with Locked On Gators. You ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all of my money go? Well, between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's pretty easy to lose track, and that's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. And Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. Oh, no. It's way more than that. It is a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop managing your money and start building wealth. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. Every day we are available daily and free wherever you listen to podcasts and on YouTube. As always, I am Brandon Olsen, and we're talking about these official visits that Florida has set up or had this past weekend. And we're going to start with safety Bralan Womack in the secondary. And 5-star on 3, 4-star everywhere else. And Bralan Womack is a player that we hadn't talked about basically ever until Vinny Sunseri got hired by Florida in January. And once Vinny Sunseri got hired, it was pretty much immediately reported, hey, Florida is now in it for Bralan Womack because of the relationship with Vinny Sunseri. And I think that basically everybody right now, I'm sure there are some people who feel differently, but for the most part, I think basically everybody still looks at Ohio State as the favorite in this recruitment. Just won a national championship. You got the best safety in college football on your team right now. I understand why Ohio State would be very enticing. Their NIL is always competitive. This is going to be a long process. He has a commitment date, I forget the exact date, but he's got a commitment set for late August is when he's planning on committing. And for Florida, again, that's good for you. You're not winning this right now. Or at least I don't think you're winning this right now. You've got time. And if you can get him on campus early in the season, have a big game there, which I know, or have a big win there, because your early season games are Long Island, USF, and then you've got road games and a bye. And so it's a while after that. But if you can get him on campus for one of those, maybe even if it's the Long Island games, go, hey, just come on campus. And let's see if we can change your mind last second, if that's before you commit, or if we can get you to push your commitment back a little bit and then get us one more chance. Still plenty of time for Florida to make moves here with Bralan Womack. 4-star corner, CJ Bronaz, a Nebraska commit, a 4-star everywhere. And I will say this because we talked about him again on Thursday. Florida State, Penn State are chasing it. Florida feels like I don't want to say Florida feels like they're leading, because I do think that the Nebraska commitment is decently solid. But similar to Javion Cooper with Syracuse, if CJ Bronaz flips, it feels like it's going to be to Florida. Like Florida's the most likely spot there. And based on how hard I've heard that Florida is just pursuing him and prioritizing him, got to feel pretty decent about that one. 4-star safety, Caden Hall, a 4-star everywhere, except he's a 3-star on 24/7. And he was the one that he said after the visit that Florida is in the lead over Alabama. And so Florida being in the lead over Alabama is huge. Visit obviously went great. He's got a commitment date set for July 5th with visits still planned for Alabama, Florida State, and Oklahoma. And so Caden Hall, momentum there, and hopefully will be a Florida Gator when it's all said and done. I mean, look, if you can somehow pull in Bralan Womack and Caden Hall, that's back-to-back years with just dominant safety hauls, okay? Because, again, don't forget, you just had a pretty damn good one with Lagonza Hayward and Hilton Stubbs. So safety haul or safety room could be just insane if you can land both of them. Then there's corner CJ Hester. Florida's the favorite here, has been for a long while. And based on this weekend, they've widened that gap. However, he still has official visits set with Iowa, Georgia, and Syracuse still. Again, one that Florida is really trending up on, one that Florida really feels like they're in the lead for. And if you can get that locked in, then we're talking about a very, very happy secondary haul early on. I forgot if I mentioned it, 4-star everywhere, except he's a 3-star on 24/7. And he was, I will say this, CJ Hester was a player that I was like, oh, he might pop this weekend. And who knows, maybe today's the day. But yeah, he was a player that thought could pop this weekend. Then there's DB Jaden Broadnax. And he's a 4-star everywhere, except he's a 3-star on 24/7. Currently a Louisville commit. Ole Miss and Auburn have had him on campus in the winter, but not for official visits, and they don't have any scheduled right now. Louisville official visit is scheduled for 3 weeks from now. And this past weekend, Florida had the official visit scheduled, and then on Friday, it gets canceled. And that's the difference that we were talking about with to revisit Javion Cooper, is that Javion Cooper, when he said he wasn't going to come on campus, we're pushing it back. Don't know when yet, but we're pushing it back. With Jaden Broadnax, it's not we're pushing it back. It's that, hey, I'm not going to be there this weekend. That was kind of it. So that one makes you feel less confident that you're going to get that going. Makes you feel less confident that he's super interested. Maybe it's one of those things where you got to see it on the field, in which case, nothing you can do until the fall, right? But Jaden Broadnax canceled his official visit for this past weekend, and hopefully Florida will be able to get him back on campus again. He's a corner safety, a hybrid, can genuinely play both spots and the star spot. So we'll see with that one. But again, Vinny Cincinnati was listed as his primary, so you're assuming that safety is probably the spot that they're going to start him out at. There were 4 other players that don't fit in the trenches and don't fit in the secondary. We're going to talk about those 4 visits when we get back with Locked On Gators. Thanks again for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. Every day we are available daily and free, whether it's in the podcast and on YouTube. And to wrap up today's show, we are talking about the final 4 players that were on campus. Again, this is just, obviously they were broken up. The way that I broke them up was trenches, secondary, and the non-factors. They were not non-factors, but the guys that don't fit those categories. And first up is 4-star athlete Heze Kent. He's a 4-star everywhere unanimously. And on Thursday, when we spoke about Heze Kent, said Florida feels like the favorite here. You look at just the sheer volume of tweets between both Heze Kent and Russ Callaway. A lot of them are just posting pictures of meeting each other, and just that recruitment process has very clear. It's been very clear that Russ Callaway is heavily prioritizing Heze Kent, right? Hayden Hansen, who of course is on the show every Wednesday during the season, was one of the players that was with Heze Kent this weekend. And we can say that definitively because four tight ends went to meet with Heze Kent. So the player recruiting going all out for Heze Kent in the tight end room. He's listed as 6'5", 300 pounds. He's just a freaking tank. Okay. He's just a tank. And based on his build, you could tell, hey, when he gets to college, he's going to shred weight, which is ideal. You get him to 6'5", 270, 6'5", 280, more reasonable. He's going to be an inline guy, most likely, but Florida clearly is heavily prioritizing him, and hopefully we'll be able to pull that one off again. I think that Florida's in the lead on this one. I think that Miami and Florida State are in this one as well. But like I mentioned on Thursday, I've been told that Florida State is lagging behind here. 3-star wide receiver Brian Williams. I don't think he'll be a 3-star for long. One hell of an offer sheet. Florida, Alabama, Penn State, Kentucky, and Notre Dame. That's just your official visits. That's not even the offer sheet. think that's a pretty good indicator of how talented he is and the kind of recruit he is. 6'4", 185, good athlete. I mean, he's your X receiver that you want to lock in early in this class. Florida's been putting an added emphasis on adding X receivers in every recruiting class. They added 2 this past cycle with Dallas Wilson and Moise Tonkara. And Brian Williams has a commitment date set for July 1st. Hopefully, Florida can go and or hopefully Florida made a lasting impression, because a lot of visits between then. And so you really hope that recency bias doesn't screw you over, which is always a fear, especially with a summer commitment where it's like, all right, well, I'm going to go on all these visits, and then 2 days later I'm committing. The school at the last visit usually feels like they're in a pretty good spot there. And that's not exactly unsurprising, right? Then you got 2 linebackers to wrap up here. Is 4-star linebacker DQ Forkpa, 3-star on 3 and 24/7, 4-star on ESPN and Rivals, 4-star by the Composite. And unsurprisingly, Florida is still in the lead here. FSU's in it. And like I mentioned on Thursday, I wouldn't be surprised if by the time this is all wrapped up, Georgia pushes. Florida might have the benefit of adding G'Nivrre Carr from IMG this past weekend, or adding G'Nivrre Carr yesterday, and DQ Forkpa, also an IMG kid. So hopefully that, or I'm not going to say hopefully, but maybe that IMG connection will help in this recruitment process. Hopefully Carr will be able to go, yeah, hey man, I'm just saying Florida's a great spot. Just going to throw that one out there. But again, Forkpa is a Georgia native at IMG, and so wouldn't shock me at all if Georgia was like, hey, you know what? We can enter late, be the dynasty program that we've been, be his local program, and we can go in there late and make some moves there. Then there's 3-star linebacker Karan Maycock, 4-star on 3 and Rivals, 3-star on 24/7 in the ESPN. FSU commit at this point, but again, like I said on Thursday, I don't think he sticks. I don't. It was quiet for him out of the official visit weekend, not much information, but he's an interesting case of someone who committed to Florida State. And pretty much since then, he's had his visits and everything, but there hasn't been a ton of information to come out from them. And committed to Florida State, but it feels more likely that he winds up at Florida or Miami than sticking with Florida State. And so that's just an interesting one there. I think tomorrow we're going to talk a bit more about G'Nivrre Carr specifically, hopefully get more in-depth on that and just the opinion of him, of his film. And if you're part of the Subtext program, if that's the show tomorrow, you should be getting a scouting report today. If you're not part of the Subtext program, the Insider program, and you want to join it, go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnGators, or the link is in the description below. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free, wherever in the podcast and on YouTube. We'll be back tomorrow, talk more Florida Gators for Locked On Gators. I'm Brandon Olsen. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Find all my written work for New York Giants on SI, and I'll see you all next time.